Welcome to this lesson on one of the more advanced critical reasoning question types that actually has a little bit of ambiguity in what the task is, which is complete the prompt questions. So let's begin by just considering the two primary types of arguments or the types of critical reasoning prompts that you will encounter, starting with argument prompts. So an argument prompt is going to provide an explicit main conclusion within the prompt every time. You're going to potentially have multiple possible tasks affecting or addressing the argument. You will likely need to evaluate the validity of said argument and its conclusion, and you'll want to apply new information provided in the choices as true in order to determine the impact of that information on the argument. You'll also want to consider some of the common arguments and assumptions that we talked about in our argumentation lessons, and you'll want to predict what the answer should do to address the specific task, whether that be weaken or strengthen or find an assumption, identify a flaw. All of these are based upon the conclusion and would constitute an argument prompt. The other type of critical reasoning prompt is going to be an inference prompt. And an inference prompt has no conclusion presented, so there's no objective piece of information requiring evaluation. You only have statements of fact that you cannot question. And you have a single possible task for all inference prompts of what must be. And there's never going to be a prediction that's possible when you encounter these tasks. You have to instead compare those choices to the facts explicitly. So let's take a look at a sample critical reasoning complete the prompt, and this is going to be our inference format. And we know that because there's no conclusion provided. We just have some facts that we'll read here in a moment. We have, as I said, a standalone scenario of facts providing information that will then allow you to logically complete the statement with one of the choices. All information has to be believed reasonably without added support. You don't want to say, hey, I actually have a background in this subject matter and know this to be outdated information. You have to treat it as true. You'll have a single question task of what must be to conclude the prompt. It can be based on any number of different things, but this is going to be always based explicitly on what is in the paragraph, not outside information. And you have to take your 5 choices that are presented and cross-check them against the statements of fact to determine whether they are reasonably certain, meaning that they must be true based solely on the statements that are presented, or something that's not definitively plausible because it could be true, could be false, or is potentially reversal extreme, that sort of thing. So let's begin by reading the prompt to start. So we're being asked which of the following best completes the passage above. And we wouldn't know that this is an inference format until we read the statements. So population variability can be divided into rare traits, which are generally influenced by negative selection, and frequent traits, which are especially important in evolutionary terms because they reflect positive selective agents and blank. There's no opinion here. It's just a fact that population variability, whatever that is, can be divided into these two types of traits, and we know that frequent traits are especially important in evolutionary terms for some reason. We don't know anything else about these two concepts, and we have to stick to what has been explicitly stated. So when we go to the answer choices, the first choice says, appear less often as genetic markers. Well, if they're especially important, they wouldn't be appearing less often. So that would be a reversal that we can eliminate. Predict the likelihood of extinction of an individual species. Well, we haven't actually spoken at all about extinction. This would be quantified as extreme. We don't know anything about whether population variability does or does not influence extinction. Choice C, negate the impact of rare traits. Well, that again is extreme and not a statement that is supported solely by the information provided. We don't know that these frequent traits explicitly negate the impact of the rare traits. It's something that is not definitively certain. Now, can furnish uniquely valuable information about population. Well, we're talking about population. We've said that the frequent traits are especially important, and this would give a reason as to why. This seems 100% reasonable based on the information provided, and we can pretty affirmatively say this matches all of the information in the statements that have been presented in the prompt. Then choice E, become increasingly selective as time passes. There's no information about the passage of time nor the change in selectivity of these traits, so we can eliminate X for being something that, again, is possible but not certain. And you can see we're not going to be able to predict what comes out of choice D, but we just have to find something that is reasonably certain based solely on the information in the paragraph. So now we'll take a look at what is often known as a since strengthen complete the prompt. And you can see before we even read it that at the end of the paragraph, we've got the word since and then a blank. And of course, our task is which of the following best completes the passage above. So with a since strengthen format, you're going to have a subjective argument that requires further support. So if we read this, Amazonian rural groups are in the process of a transition from a more traditional to a more westernized lifestyle, leading to nutritional and epidemiological challenges. Unfortunately, a lack of public policies sensitive to their reality will make them continue to suffer for the decades to come. Well, I don't necessarily believe that. It's possible, but I need some additional information. And that's telling us we've got a since strengthened, because these aren't just statements of fact. There is a clear opinion here that we've highlighted. Now, the evidence provided will lead to a reasonable claim that is directly prior to the blank to fill. So what that means is the since is the reasoning for the conclusion that came right before it. So what our correct answer is going to be the evidence that we need to believe this claim that we've highlighted that comes immediately prior to the blank to fill. Again, these support indicator terms such as since or because often will indicate that what you're being asked with this style of complete the prompt question is to strengthen an argument, not just find something that would act as a conclusion. We actually want the support. Now, again, the implicit question of the task is going to be what information would provide direct support to that preceding claim that we've highlighted. And our 5 choices we have to consider as true to determine which would bolster the argument. So we've got our options. The first is westernized lifestyles are known to be not preferred by some societies. Well, some societies, how many? Does this include the Amazonian rural groups? We don't know if they prefer or don't prefer, so that's vague. We can eliminate that pretty confidently for our common argumentation wrong answers. Viruses are a primary concern for researchers in the Amazon rainforest. Well, our conclusion is about the Amazonian rural groups, not the researchers. So what happens to the researchers has no impact on the rural groups. We can eliminate choice B for having no clear impact on the conclusion. International groups have begun lobbying on behalf of these rural groups. Well, if international groups have begun lobbying on their behalf, maybe they will actually get some public policies in their favor. So this would function as a reversal. Choice D, rural groups are underrepresented in Amazonian governing bodies. Well, if this is true, then they're not making the public policies themselves. They're not represented, and this would strengthen the idea that you'd end up with public policies that are insensitive to the reality of the rural groups. So this would provide the support we'd seek in the blank. And choice E, public policies in the Amazon are often dictated by corporate interests. This is a trap because we don't know what those corporate interests are and whether or not they're actually related to the Amazonian rural groups. They could be separate, they could be similar, they could be aligned. We have no idea. Your own implicit bias may make corporate interests seem like a negative and therefore support the idea that these Amazonian rural groups are going to suffer, but we'd actually need additional outside information to know that for certain. And we'd be able to select D by following our processes for a strengthen, but applying it to a complete the prompt format. So there are 2 types of critical reasoning support that you'll encounter. The first is supporting an argument. So this is just a strengthen task. And this can be identified if one of the choices is intended to quote unquote support the prompt. You're going to have to apply the choices to determine the impact on the argument, and often the support implication is identifiable by the term argument in the question stem. So if you're being asked to support an argument, you're actually being asked to apply the choices up to the prompt. And that's the direction that the question will work, is that you've got to take the choices and apply them to the prompt to find the correct answer that supports the conclusion that was presented. The other support you can encounter on critical reasoning questions is going to be supporting a choice. And this is when you have no conclusion presented and you only have statements of fact that are intended to support one of the following inferences. And you're going to have, you may not see the term inference literally, but you will frequently see the phrase of the following. And you're going to have a single possible task here of what must be. Either what must be true or what must be false. And it can be either, so you have to be careful about what you are trying to determine must be without ambiguity. And you're going to know these style of support questions because the prompt is going to lead to a choice. So if you've got to take the prompt and apply it to determine which of the choices is true, you're really looking at an inference task, regardless of the term support. So this is an important distinction to have. You've got to determine when you see the word support in critical reasoning questions in the task, whether you are supposed to support the argument or support a choice, because you have very different processes depending on that differentiation. Now, our critical reasoning complete the prompt process just overall. First, you got to identify the question task needed to complete the prompt. If there's a conclusion present, you're looking at a since strengthen. You have to just determine what is going to strengthen the argument that likely came directly before. If there's no conclusion present, you're looking at an inference task. You have to find something that must reasonably be true without additional information outside of the prompt. Step 2 is going to be read the prompt and take the notes. So if it's a strengthen task, you'll have to read the prompt, note the exact conclusion, and determine, exactly what the scenario is that's objectively or subjectively being presented. For an inference task, you'll want to read the prompt and just shorthand note your statements of fact. There's nothing to interpret here except literally, so you just take shorthand notes. Then you'll only want to predict if you're looking at a strengthen task, the argument style of a complete the prompt, because you can't predict what an inference is going to be. It's nearly impossible to do, so don't try to do that. But you'll just broadly predict what the answer should do to strengthen the argument, and that argument is likely immediately before the since or because that leads into the blank. So if you've got a strengthen task, you're following the same process as what we had for a standard strengthen task problem, just it's a complete the prompt strengthen instead of a standard which of the following strengthens. And then, of course, go to process of elimination. For an argument, complete the prompt, a strengthen, complete the prompt. Your common wrong strengthen answers will be in play. Things that are reversals, so things that would weaken the conclusion. Things that are vague, that you cannot determine the clear impact on whether it strengthens or weakens the conclusion. Things where additional information is needed to evaluate the impact. These are basically things that you would say are new variables that aren't definitively articulated in the prompt, and no impact means that whether the information is true or false, it truly has no impact on whatever the conclusion was. And for your inference and correct answers, remember those are going to be reversals and answer choices that have the information backwards. Extreme inferences, things that go too far. The prompt said sometimes, the answer choice said always, those sorts of things. And then simply an option that could be, but doesn't have to be with certainty. So if you follow these steps with complete the prompt questions, you'll be able to excel on one of the harder question types on the critical reasoning section. So let's go ahead and do a couple of examples, starting with a support example on the whiteboard to illustrate these processes live. So we have a sample question here on the whiteboard that is asking which of the following is most supported by the information given above. So this question, the prompt is intended to support a choice. So that indicates our task directly, which is going to be a what must be or inference style prompt question. So we set up our scratch pad. what must be. And we're just going to take some shorthand fact notes, and you can preemptively set up, say, 3 facts for where you're going to just jot down what the prompt says as we go. So liver size has been identified as a good indicator of how healthy a rat is. So we know liver size equals rat health indicator. And that unwell rats generally have larger livers than do healthy rats. Okay, so if we've got an increase in liver size, that means we have a decrease in rat health. And you want to kind of translate that because unwell have larger livers. We're talking about health, so just kind of make it more streamlined and simple for you to keep track of. Furthermore, in a recently concluded riparian wildlife study, biologists found that most river rats that had been killed by predators had substantially larger livers than did river rats killed accidentally. So, RR for river rat killed by predator liver is greater than a RR killed accidentally liver. So again, just have a nice little simple, like almost algebraic inequality for this. Now we have to go to our answer choices and compare them against these facts to make sure that they are definitively certain based solely on the information provided, requiring no outside information. So choice A, healthy river rats cannot be caught by most airborne predators. Well, this cannot is extreme because we don't know that it's absolutely a healthy river rat cannot be caught. Nor do we have any information differentiating for airborne predators. So this would be both extreme and only a possibility, not something that is certain based on the information. Now, choice B can be a little bit of a trap. Larger livers prevent river rats from escaping predators. Well, we know that the larger livers are present in river rats that are killed by predators, according to this study, but we don't know that those larger livers, in fact, literally prevent the river rats from escaping said predators. So that too would be extreme. Healthy rats never possess a liver larger than that of an unhealthy rat. Again, this is too extreme. We don't know that it's never the case that a healthy rat has a larger liver than an unhealthy rat, so that too can be chalked up as extreme. River rat predators can differentiate a healthy rat from a sickly one. Well, this is again appealing from choice D, but if we interpret it literally, we can't apply or assign that level of agency to a predator so that they're able to say, that rat right there, it's got it's a more healthy rat than a sickly one. We don't know that. It's just that they end up killing them in the end. So this too would be extreme. But healthy river rats are less likely to be captured by a predator than are unhealthy ones. Well, this fits our statements almost exactly because we've got the river rat killed by a predator has a liver larger than the accidentally killed river rat does. And we know from earlier in the paragraph that liver size correlates to rat health and that a larger liver means that you've got a less healthy rat. So you're basically just synthesizing all the information into one statement, and choice E is the correct answer. Then, if we scroll down, we'll take a look at one more of these. So this time we've got one of our complete the prompt style questions. So again, we don't necessarily know how we're going to need to complete the prompt as we begin setting up our scratch pad. So we start out, we read the task. It says, which of the following most logically completes the argument below? As new technologies penetrate nearly all industries, people who can adapt to new tools at their jobs prosper, while those who cannot are rendered obsolete. Nonetheless, it is clear that simply resisting new technology cannot prevent job loss because. So this, even though it doesn't use the exact same term, is one of our since strengthens. Because we have a conclusion immediately preceding the support indicator term of because. So we need to just come up with our prediction. So we need to find info in the choice to show that simply resisting technology cannot stop job loss. And we're going to focus on this prediction of the conclusion, basically saying that it seems reasonable, is supported by something in our answer choices. So companies that don't evolve are often driven out of business by more agile competitors. Well, we know that those who adapt, sometimes there's people that are rendered obsolete. So maybe if we don't adapt, then we can keep those people's jobs. But choice A shows that no, if you don't adapt, you're going to be driven out of business by the competitors. So you're still going to end up having to deal with the job loss. So resisting technology, if we follow choice A, doesn't stop the job loss. So this seems pretty good. Now, we'll continue through the answer choices as you should on every question in the critical reasoning, but you can probably go a little bit more briskly through the answer choices once you've got something that matches the prediction quite nicely as choice A does here. So choice B, the initial costs of implementing new technologies can be onerous to smaller businesses. There's a bunch of additional information that isn't talking about job loss specifically. So all of these things need additional information. Then training programs required to successfully adopt new technologies are not always subsidized. Well, there's another idea or two that requires new information about subsidizing these training programs, what these training programs might be. Certainly can eliminate C relatively quickly. Choice D, there is always a subsequent technology being developed in this era of planned obsolescence. Well, a very philosophical idea that might potentially get a squiggle, but it's nowhere near as good as that choice A. And just because there's a subsequent technology being developed, we don't know when it's going to come into play. We don't know the impact. So once again, this could probably be eliminated for needing additional information if we were being more technical about it. And lastly, unemployment benefits are a common safety net in most modern societies, or modern economies rather. Really, it's completely not relevant to this specific conclusion and our prediction. So while that may be nice that there are unemployment benefits for the people who lose their jobs, that has no impact on the ultimate conclusion that we started with. So these are just a couple of examples of both a support kind of question that we saw before. So which of the following is supported by the prompt, as well as the complete the prompt style questions that can generally be both that inference style task or a kind of hidden since strengthen style task. So go ahead and attempt some of these questions on your own and learn better how to differentiate between these more advanced question tasks in critical reasoning.